Oh Lord, take our minds and think through them. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you. Amen. Be seated. Last week we heard the very first part, or near the very first part, of the long story of Joseph. And then today we heard the very last part. We missed all the middle, which is where all the action takes place, and where the point of the story is revealed. It would kind of be like if you went to Subway and you ordered just everything on a sandwich, and you were really excited about it, and you had, your piece of bread and all the stuff on the sandwich, olives and onions and whatever you like to have it with. That's what I like to have on it. And then it would be like when you sat down to eat, you took out the middle, threw it away, and just ate the 2 pieces of bread, the front and the back. That's kind of like what we've done to the story of Joseph, with just hearing that first part there last week and this part. So it's an important story, because the theme of that story is very important to the whole understanding of how God works with us in the world. And so today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to tell you the story of Joseph. I brought my story bag with me. In some places I'm known as the story bag lady, because I tell stories usually with props from the bag. So here's the story of Joseph from the biblical book of Genesis to you. I don't know whether everything happened exactly this way or not, but I do know that what the story tells is true. When our story begins, we know first that Jacob has 12 sons. Here are his sons. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Leah's slave Zilpah were Gad and Asher. These were the 12 sons of Jacob. And they didn't always get along together, because all the sons from before Joseph were born at different times in Jacob's younger years. And they were more of an age. And it had been a time of great strife in Jacob's family, because there was a lot of jealousy between Leah and Rachel, because even though Rachel was the most beloved wife that he had, Leah was the one that kept producing sons. And so finally in his old age, when Rachel had Joseph, he was absolutely thrilled. Now he had son Joseph, and Joseph got a lot of special attention. He was a little bit younger than the others, and so he got special attention, which didn't always go over very well. Then a little bit later, when Rachel finally had another one, Benjamin, Jacob had a brother that was a brother of his own, whom he loved dearly. He loved his other brothers, but there was a special part in Jacob and in Joseph's heart for Benjamin, and in Jacob's heart for Joseph, because Joseph was the child of his old age and the child of Rachel who had died. Joseph was a little bit annoying. He was not innocent in this whole story. His brothers had reason to be annoyed with him. For one thing, while his brothers were off working their heads off and keeping the sheep and staying out and camping, Joseph was at home with Jacob having a wonderful time, and Jacob even made him this wonderful long-sleeve coat with all this colorful embroidery on it, kind of meaning that, Joseph wasn't going to have to do any work, because you didn't work in a coat like that. You sat around in a coat like that and admired. That didn't go over very big with the other guys. In addition to that, Joseph loved to go find them while they were out in the fields and sneak up on them and come listen to what they were saying. And if it was something that maybe his dad Jacob wouldn't approve of, he'd run back to the place and tell them. And that didn't go over too big. Well, if that wasn't enough, Jacob started having dreams. One dream he had, which he loved to tell his brothers, was that they were in a field of wheat. And out of the field of wheat, 12 sheaves of wheat arose. 12 brothers, 12 sheaves of wheat. And all of the sheaves but his bowed down to him. And so he told his brothers this, which, as you can tell, would probably make them pretty angry that they were going to bow down to their little brother. So that didn't go over too good. And he had another dream. In this dream, which he told to all of them again, including his father, he had a dream that he, Joseph, was there, and the sun and the moon and 11 stars, Joseph has 11 brothers, all bowed down to Joseph. Now, not only were his brothers pretty angry about that, his father wasn't too pleased either. He said, "What is this, son? I mean, I've been on your side. I've made you this beautiful coat. Every time the brothers say that you tattled on them, I take your side. You know, I was a little upset when you had that dream about all the wheat bowing down, but now are you saying that, your beloved mother who's in heaven and me, that we're to bow down to you too? What is this, son?" So nobody was too happy with Joseph, but Jacob couldn't stay mad at him that long. But the brothers got madder and madder and madder. They could have killed him, which actually they tried to do. But instead of killing him, they ended up just selling him. Now, if you've ever had a little brother or sister, there are times when you might like to sell them. But his brothers really did. Sold him into slavery in Egypt. It was something that they had intended for evil. Because they thought no good would come for Jacob in Egypt, certainly, as a slave. The life of a slave could be very hard. And they took his coat, his beautiful coat, and they dipped it in animal blood, and they took it to his dad and convinced his dad that Joseph's been eaten by a wild animal. The dad bought it. He was getting kind of old. So he thought Joseph was really dead. And Joseph was in Egypt. However, Joseph didn't end up a slave to a mean master. He ended up in a house of a nobleman, one of Pharaoh's most prized noblemen, Potiphar. What his brothers had intended for evil, God had turned to use for good. So here's Joseph in Potiphar's house, and they're making a real Egyptian man of him. And he is there, and he grows. And some years pass. They dress him like an Egyptian. He has a beautiful cape, like a rich Egyptian. And he works at Potiphar's house, basically keeping Potiphar's household. He goes there every day. And Potiphar's household just thrives with Jacob taking care of it. So everything was pretty good, except that Potiphar had a wife who was very beautiful and mysterious. And she took a liking to Joseph. I mean, what was not to like? Big, handsome Hebrew man dressed as an Egyptian, a little bit farm, a little bit home. So she says to Joseph, "Come to my boudoir." And Joseph very stalwartly says, "Of course not. Your husband is my friend. He trusts me. He's given me all of this to look over. I'm not going to do that." But this happened every single day. He would go to work, and Potiphar's wife, "Come to my boudoir." Until one day, when he got there, she went up to him, grabbed his cloak, and said, "You are coming to my boudoir now." And he ran away, and the cloak was left behind. She was so insulted that she began to scream. And all the servants rushed in, and as soon as they got there, she said, that Hebrew man that my husband brought into this house, tried to take advantage of me. And so they ran, they got Potiphar, and they brought him back, and they told Potiphar, and Potiphar went to her and said, "Is this true? Did Joseph do this to you?" And she said, "Yes, here is the cloak he gave him." And of course, Potiphar recognized the cloak. And believed his wife. And so they took Joseph and they threw him into prison. Because Potiphar's wife intended a bit of evil for him in prison. However, while Joseph was in prison, he began to interpret dreams from the prisoners. The prisoners would tell him dreams, and Joseph would pray to God, and God would give him the meaning of the dream, and lo and behold, those things usually came true. And so years passed while he did this. And then one day, Pharaoh had a dream. He actually had two dreams. They were very disturbing dreams. You know, have you ever had a dream that you know might be kind of important, but it's full of all these symbols and you can't really decide what they mean? That's the kind of dreams these were. And Pharaoh brought all of his wisest men and magicians in, and none of them could help him with the dream. Until one person remembered that back in the prisons, there was this guy named Joseph who seemed to be pretty good with dreams. So Pharaoh said, bring him to me, bring him to me. And Joseph comes to him. And Joseph says, tell me your dream. Well, the first dream had cows in it. In the first dream, Pharaoh dreamed that there were 7 fat cows. And then there were 7 very skinny cows that came up, just skeletons of cows, skin and bones. And the skeletons of cows ate up the big fat cows. Weird dream, huh? And so Joseph said, all right, what else? Joseph said, well, we had some more wheat again. God seems to like to send wheat in dreams. So in this one, there were 7 sheaves of wheat that were full and wonderful, and then 7 sheaves of wheat that were nothing. And the 7 sheaves of wheat that were nothing ate up the 7 sheaves of wheat that were full. Oh, weird dream. Joseph looks at Potiphar and he says, it's really the same dream. Potiphar goes, huh? Cows, wheat? It's the same dream. God's giving you a warning, a heads up. There are going to be 7 years of plenty. That's what the big fat cows and all the full wheat mean. And then there are going to be 7 years of famine. And God's telling you so that you can prepare. So Pharaoh, Joseph says, what you need to do, you need to make the best use of these 7 years that you can. You need to put somebody that's really good, that you can really trust, in charge of all of the grain in Egypt. And you need to build storehouses, and you need to begin to store up everything you can, so when the 7 years of famine come, you'll be taken care of. And Pharaoh looks around, he says, Joseph, you're the man. And so what Potiphar's wife had intended for evil, God took and used for good, because now Joseph was second in command in all of Egypt. And so when the famine came, and his brothers and his father, who thought he was dead, were starving to death in Canaan, they heard that there was grain in Egypt. And the fathers sent the brothers to Egypt to get the grain. And the brothers came in, and of course they didn't recognize Joseph. He was older by that time, and lo and behold, they came in and they bowed down. Wasn't there a dream about that? They bowed down, and Joseph sold them some wheat, but he recognized them. But he wasn't quite ready to tell them who he was. And so he gave them their wheat, sent them off on their way, but he had his servants put their money back in their grain, so it looked like they had stolen the money back. And he had found out by his sneaky little conversations that his brother Benjamin was alive, and he said, you know, if you want more wheat, you'll need to bring Benjamin back. Oh, no, we can't do that. He's our dad's favorite. Okay, then I'll take one of you. You stay here. So now they have to go home. They've got the grain. They've lost the brother. They've got to bring Benjamin back to get the other brother. They get home. They find the money, and then they go, oh, no, this does not look good for us. And so they just eat up all the grain they've got until they have no other choice. And then they go back with Benjamin. And the same thing kind of happens again. He lets them all go. They go with the grain, he puts the money back in their sacks, and this time he says to his servant, hide this in the youngest cup. It's this, my wine chalice, my own personal one. Hide it in the youngest bag. So they hide it in Benjamin's bag. They get a little bit down the road. He tells the servants, now go get him and tell him that one of them has stolen my cup, and he must die or become my slave. And so they go, they find it, they go through all the grain, and of course, here's the cup in Benjamin's bag. He's playing around with them a little bit. He wants them to see that what they had done was really evil. But then when they bring Benjamin back, we catch up with the reading we had today. And he can't stand it anymore. He has to turn away, and he cries, and he turns back, and he tells them who he is. They're not really sure whether it's okay or not, because they know what they did. And they know he knows what they did. And they bow down to him. But he tells them to get up. And he says, it's okay. Because what you meant for evil, God's turned to use for good. Now that's not only the story of Joseph. That appears in the Bible in many other ways. When Pharaoh enslaves the people of Egypt and intended it for evil, God sends Moses, forms a new people out of them to be the light of the nations, and uses that evil for good. When they arrest Jesus many, many years later and crucify him, they intended for evil, but he rises to bring new life to us all, and God uses it for good. And over the history of the world, we've seen that over and over and over again. From the evil of the Holocaust came many incredibly wonderful people who risked their lives in the underground. Came many people with acts of love who took in Jewish families at risk to their own family. Came much of the deep spiritual literature from people like Elie Wiesel, books like from Anne Frank. It didn't take away the evil, but God didn't let evil have the last word. He used it for good. And in our lives, we see it, whether people intentionally commit evil against us or whether we just get caught up in the brokenness of the world, and that evil brokenness of the world just invades our life with illness or loss or grief. I think about, this past week and Robin Williams' suicide. Certainly an evil thing that just took over his life with that depression that ate away at him in darkness. The evil of not thinking you're worthy even to live. And it is an evil that will hurt his family forever. And yet, as I've looked at Facebook, already people are talking about what depression looks like and sharing their stories in a way that might help somebody else. Already God has taken the darkness of the evil of depression that came into a kind man's life and has found a way to use it for good. That's the story from the book of Genesis to you. I don't know whether the Joseph story happened that way or not.